r/AskReddit. What is the douchiest/worst thing you've ever seen someone do to their significant other in public? The other day I was standing in line to get food when I noticed the couple in front of me. Right away I knew he would be a complete tool. It was 8 PM and he had sunglasses on inside, lowering his head to peer over them at people. He was in full Ed Hardy gear and was gripping the shoulder of the girl next to him aggressively. She was chatting away excitedly about the food she was going to order. He rolled his eyes at her and didn't listen to a word she had to say. She seemed nice enough, bubbly and friendly, and had a banging body. Thin, naturally tanned, toned, with massive boobs. They approach the counter, and she brightens up as she orders her meal, fries with cheese and gravy. The guy next to her makes a noise of disgust and says loudly, "I can't believe you're eating this shit. You're going to end up like her." He nods behind them to me. I narrowed my eyes at him as she goes on to say she'll have a Coke. The guy holds up his hand to her face and goes, "She'll have a water." Now, he could just be looking out for her well-being, but people should always be allowed to make their own decisions. A significant other does not get to make it for them. I was livid at this point. Not only had he insulted me, but he'd also completely shut down his own girlfriend. Douche. Bag. Edit. There aren't many, but some of you are commenting on my weight. Most are getting downvoted into oblivion. But just remember that when you make those comments, someone, myself, reads them and may take it to heart. Hello. Yes, this is Opus. It's not always black and white, guys. To some, I'm fat as hell. To others, such as my boyfriend, I'm gorgeous. Please try to keep that in mind. Isn't it interesting how I received comments telling me I deserved it for being a fatty, PMs telling me to diet and kill myself for being so fat, and now because I'm suddenly not how people pictured me, they're eating their words and sending me apologies and PMs asking me for sex. No, go and fuck yourself for treating another human being that way. Had a friend/housemate whose girlfriend treated him like shit. He tried to break it off a few times. She wouldn't let him. I was never clear on how that worked, but it probably involved their close families and mutual friends. I was neither. We were at a party at his house, and things were going well. She was being chatty and flirty with other guys as she often did, but he was just having a good time, talking to lots of people. At some point, they disappear from the party, and you start hearing shouting from his room. We don't know whether to intervene or not, but they're both just shouting through a semi-closed door, so we kind of let them go. Basically, he's calling her out on her shit. She's going for petty insults. Then she sees there are people outside the door and immediately bursts into tears. Now he's a dude yelling at a crying woman. He realizes what's going on, smashes something of his against the wall. All attention is now on that situation. Ladies take the girl away downstairs. I try to talk my friend down. When I come downstairs, she's spreading a sob story, alluding that he might have hit her, etc. Basically trying to make him look like a monster for finally standing up to her. I realize this doesn't seem like much, but it came at the head of years of this shit and I couldn't believe how a person could do that to someone they cared about. Two of us, one lady and myself, took her and her friend/flatmate outside, and I hailed a cab. We put them in it. I give the cabbie a 20 and told him to take them home. She smiles and thanks me for being so caring. I leaned in through the open window and whispered that she is dead to me, and if she ever set foot in my house again, I'm calling the cops. The shocked face she made as the cabbie drove off wasn't satisfying at the time, but now that they've been broken up for years, it's a very fond memory. Epilogue. My friend and I skipped out on the rest of party and the accusing glances, and went for a long walk. I was on holiday in India a few years back, and one night we went out clubbing in Goa. A big beefy dude starting beating up his girlfriend on the dancer floor, dragging her around by her hair, shit like that. A big crowd gathered, but Noon tried to stop him. Two of my mates stepped in to help. One was about half his size, the other did a bit of martial arts. Between the two they managed to separate him from his GF and knock him the fuck out. She told us she wanted to leave and head back home. in another city, so we wound up taking her back to her hotel so she could grab her things. We tried to be quick, but the room was a mess and took a while to get sorted. Meanwhile, he rocked up with a bunch of his mates to stop us. By this point there were about 4 of us, so we managed to delay them and get away with minimal damage. We put her in a taxi and got her a train ticket back to her hometown. She managed to get home safely and called up my mates a few times after that, calling them her guardian angels and asking to meet up, but by then we'd already left for another town and that was that. I was visiting family up in Ohio when I walked out of a store and saw an arguing couple on the walkway. At this point she was crying and he was calling her every degrading name in the book. My blood was already boiling because anybody who has the audacity to do that in public is most likely worse in private. But it was just one of those things you had to walk away from. That's when he hit her. I heard a loud slap as he told her to shut the fuck up and stop crying. After that my sight went red. I'm sorry, but at no point is it okay to hit somebody who is not a threat to you or to those with the inability to defend themselves, especially if it is somebody significantly smaller than you. Without hesitation I dropped my stuff, beelined to them, and the second our eyes met I decked him in the face. He lost his balance for a second, and I took that opportunity to grab him by his clothes and throw him over the railing behind us. He flipped over it and hit the ground hard, and he just started sounding pathetic after that. The girl freaked out, but didn't fight me or yell at me or do anything to defend him, so I can be thankful for that. Hopefully that was enough of a realization for her. After the initial rush, I told him something along the lines of never touching a girl again. That, unfortunately, was when I met his older brother. I guess he was in a car or something, but at this point I was walking away, and he intercepted me. This guy had an easy 60 to 80 lbs on me, and he used it well, pushing me off my feet with one shove. I got back up, and I started doing what I could, but eventually he nailed me in the neck and I almost blacked out, opening my eyes to see him sitting on top of me with my arms pinned to my sides. I wasn't very pretty by the end of it, but the cops were called at some point, so he eventually got off and bolted. Good times. I wasn't here, but this happened to one of my roommates. She just joined a sorority this past semester of school and was taking her on again off again BF to the spring formal. It was her birthday weekend, and she was really excited to have a nice and fun event to go to with him as they had been having problems prior to this and were just getting back to normal. She has an incredibly fit and athletic body and was wearing a really tight fitting dress, so other guys at the formal were checking her out. Her BF saw this and snapped on her for it within 10 minutes of being there. He started yelling at her in front of all of her new sisters and friends for being a slut and about how he can't trust her, even though she did nothing to facilitate the being looked at wrong. He brought up all of her close guy friends whom she hung out with, but didn't actually do anything with when they were broken up. Not to mention, the last time they broke up, he didn't actually tell her. She found out when she went over to see him, and his roommates told her he was at a party trying to get with some random girls. She left that formal sobbing within the first half hour of being there, and her shithead BF stayed all night to partake in the free sorority booze with his buddies. She took him back 3 days later. I first became aware a friend of mine was an abusive knob when my wife and I were having dinner with his wife. I knew this guy since he was 18. He was fun, smart, and had a great sense of humor. When he got married in his 20s, he and his bride seemed like a happy couple until we started hanging around them more. His wife was always quiet with a small smile, and so we tried to include her in our circle because we wanted to get to know her better and so she wouldn't feel like an outsider. One night, we were out at a themed bar and they were serving drinks that were kind of exotic. His wife, who was normally very quiet, ordered one that had a glow stick in it which made him raise an eyebrow, but he said, "I'll allow it." At some point, we are laughing and having a good time when she starts playing with the umbrella in her drink like it's a real parasol over her head and then put it in her hair. My friend started to change mood drastically. Then she did the unthinkable and took the glow stick and put it between her breasts just to be silly. She wasn't being flirtatious or lewd, and the table atmosphere had been casual and silly. But my friend then crossed his arms, very slowly and purposefully, and glared at her. He stared her down but said nothing. She did the usual, "What?" thing, but quickly, she started to break down. She got quiet, took the glow stick out, and then placed it on the table, and stared at the table blankly. He kept glaring at her, and the longer he did it, the more shy and withdrawn she looked, until she started to tremble, and tried not to cry. Then he stopped, and calmly looked at us, and pretended like nothing had happened with us so anyway. Kind of attitude like his wife had completely embarrassed him, and he put an end to that right away. She never spoke a word the rest of the night, and he ignored her. My wife and I were shocked, and didn't know what to do. It was the first hint we had that he was very controlling and abusive, and as the months went on, it became rather obvious she was miserable and scared. Thankfully, that poor girl eventually left him, and his ex-husband is no longer our friend. My brother and I were invited to a party by a girl he had been after since high school. Everyone there was trashy and had been drinking since 2 in the afternoon. It was pretty much married or living together couples. We tried to blend in and catch up on drinking a little, but it became obvious that we just weren't fitting in. Somehow the conversation turned to 2 of the girls discussing making out. So the husband and boyfriend told them that if the girls made out for 5 minutes they would each give the girls $100. So the girls go at it. This was fucking hot watching 2 20-something girls French kiss. At the 3-minute mark they paused for a second to swallow, catch their breath of otherwise aggressive lip lock, then continue. The guys refused to pay up because they didn't do it for a complete 5 minutes. This starts an argument which gets more and more heated. The girls refuse to drop it. One couple gets into a heated debate where other stuff about her job and his truck get thrown into the mix. Their anger seemed to run its course, but it's tense. The couple sit near each other quietly for a few minutes. Then the guy just jumps up, grabs his girl by the hair and attempts to haul her home. This prompts another guy to get in his face and tell him that this was not the way guys treat their women. They have a chest to just stare down. At this point my brother and I noped it the fuck out of there. My brother's friend told us that pretty much the same thing happened every Friday. After a few hours someone would end up fighting someone. The guy that came to the defense of the other guy's girl had beaten his girl up more than once as well. They were confused as to why we left when the party was just getting good. Not sure if this will count. I recently moved into an apartment downtown, and our view out the window is looking down at a bar. I was watching some TV when I heard some pretty insane yelling. I get up and move towards the window, where I see a group of about 10 guys arguing with one another. I'm watching and thinking that these guys are a second away from fighting. I get my phone out to maybe call police to come and check it out, but it's too late. Several guys pair up and start fighting. Most of them aren't even landing anything and just moving around. But one guy, literally 6 feet 4 inches and about 250 pounds, just lays this one guy out. He gets knocked unconscious, and I'm on the phone telling police where it's happening. But then the huge motherfucking guy goes up to the kid he just knocked out and starts kicking his head into the cement. Then this girl goes up to the guy, who's curb stomping her boyfriend, starts pulling on his shirt to make him stop. The guy turns around, pauses because he thinks it's probably another guy, and straight up punches his girlfriend, and now she's laid out on the street too. I instantly run downstairs and start to tend to the guy and the girl until police and Gold Cross came. I'm a EMT and future med student. The guy apparently tried to flee down the street, got in his car, and a good Samaritan who saw what happened from his vehicle parked behind him so he couldn't drive off. Talked to police afterwards, and the most messed up thing was after the guy did all that, and while I was running downstairs, he went up to another guy and bit about 1/4 of a guy's ear off. I was on my way to my dad's house and stopped at a traffic light when the SUV in front of me began rocking back and forth. I saw a fist fly from the passenger seat to the driver's seat. I exited my vehicle and approached the driver's side. In the driver's seat was a crying woman who had a huge welt on her face. There was a young kid in the back seat. "Ma'am, are you okay? Would you like me to call the police?" Through her tears and crying she said, "No, I'm okay." Her so yelled at me to mind my own business, so I did. I went back to my car, just in time for the light to turn green. We were both in the right turn only lane, so we both turned right. I gave the SUV some distance and followed. We were going the same direction anyhow. In the middle of a 55 miles per hour zone, the SUV suddenly came to a complete stop. Apparently the SUV had yanked the keys out of the ignition. The car started back up and sped off. I was still behind. They pulled into a gas station at the next major intersection. I pulled in and parked at the gas pumps where they had parked against the building. So jumps out of the passenger side, runs over to the driver's side, and literally rips this poor woman out of the car. He then proceeds to shove her up against the building and choke her. Mind you, this is daytime, and there are 15 plus other cars at this very busy gas station. So I pulled my vehicle up and parked it directly behind the SUV, cop style, at an angle, making it impossible for them to leave. At this point I was on the phone with 911, and the sergeant I had been patched to informed me several squad cars were on the way. The man then approached me and threatened to kick my ass, etc. I responded by retrieving Mr. Glock 19 from the glove box, exiting the vehicle, and telling the guy to get on the ground and put his hands behind his head. He complied. The police arrived on scene about 60 seconds after I held him at gunpoint and took him into custody. I testified against him in court several weeks later, and he was sentenced to 2 years in state jail for aggravated assault. Moral of the story: don't hit a woman. Ever. Especially not in front of me. Edit. Moral of the story: don't harm another life anywhere near me. I worked in a water park for about a year. One day I began hearing reports on my radio about a family, couple and a young son, that were causing a scene by the locker rooms. Apparently the wife had lost the car keys, so the husband was now yelling at her and swearing at her in full public. She just stood there and took it with an embarrassed look on her face. My supervisor stood nearby in case things became physical. He was a big weightlifter, so he was our go-to guy in physical confrontations. I just wish there was something that we could have done. It was obviously an unhealthy relationship. Oh wow, that just reminded me. Went to a concert about 5 hours from where I live. Was with a total douchinazel at the time. I drove my car, and when we got there, requested he hold the keys for me, since I didn't want to take my purse into such a crowded event and guys' pockets are larger. He refused, whatever, so I put them in my back pocket. Turned out, my pocket had a hole and my keys had fallen out God knows where. He told all of his friends that were with us, and others when we got back home, that I did it on purpose. For attention, I think, and screamed at me, telling me I was completely insane and worthless and I needed professional help. WTF. The keys were never found, and I ended up spending over $400. Keysmith. Cab rides back and forth to the Honda dealership, which was nowhere close to the venue, etc. That, by the way, was after being discounted by everyone who had to charge me, only because they saw how I was being treated like shit while I was trying to fix the issue. Later, in private, he changed his story to say that one of his friends saw me drop them in the trash. They were all present when I discovered the keys were lost and said nothing before he started making accusations. He had multiple instances of completely rewriting reality in his head and actually believed it. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen a person do psychologically. P.S. I wrote this comment on purpose and I did it for attention. I really hope this gets buried because it's completely humiliating, but I really need to post it anyway. My ex-husband frequently went off on tirades at me in public for whatever thing may have been pissing him off that day, like him not being able to afford more video games, or weed, or the fact that I was taking too long while trying to get to and from town about a 2-mile walk while I was 9 months pregnant, or just because he was in a bad mood. Often, I'd find myself being yelled at and called every name in the book in the local Asda, just trying not to piss him off more, while feeling more embarrassed than I can even explain. Then he'd storm off, and I'd wait around in town, afraid to go home. But he never did anything like this in front of his friends, until we were in the train station in the city one day, and I had made plans to be back home, to meet some of my own friends. Before he was ready to leave, I had to stand there in the middle of the crowded train station while he screamed that I wasn't allowed to make plans without his permission, accusing me of being a cheating whore, etc. All in front of our friend, who didn't say anything to my ex, because I think he was just as shocked as I was. I did end up just taking my son and going home and not calling my friends. I'm terrible at describing things, but oh well. It's something to get it off my chest to more than just my closest friends. And luckily I'm no longer with a controlling bastard. The only downside being I still have to see him twice a week to drop off and pick up our son due to a custody agreement. But my life is pretty amazing right now. He has nothing. Especially now that he lost his little beaten dog of a wife. I once made the mistake of dating a guy who is the douche of all douches. The only reason he had me around was to support him and a marijuana grow opus. He had forced me to quit working for my family business because a $1 raise every 6 months wasn't good enough for him, and I got a job working for a canvassing company. I knew it was a total scam, so I quit after 2 days. The day I quit I had met him at bar, where he had been drinking, on my dime, all night, so that I could try to get my debit card from him and leave, but it was obvious that he was totally trashed and extremely pissed off. When he gave up the debit card I tried to get away from him and back to his house first, so I could get my valuables and go to my parents' house before he beat the shit out of me, but I had no such luck. He found me at the bus stop and started terrorizing me right there in front of probably 6 or 7 other people, calling me names, telling me I'm a worthless whore and that I deserve to die, and on and on. After standing there and trying to ignore him whilst trying to find a way to call the cops without him noticing, I eventually retorted, and he spit in my face, slapped me and knocked my phone from my hand, breaking it. Some guys across the street noticed what happened and started to cross and do something about it. My ex took off his shirt, pulled a knife, and made them walk away. He proceeded to yell at me more and spit in my face again and say I saw you looking at them. You wanted those guys to come over and beat me up and then fuck you, didn't you? You don't care about me at all, you worthless bitch, blah blah. And then he ran off for literally no reason I could see. He just ran. Before the bus came, he had ran back to me and was crying and apologizing. I regrettably went back home with him that night and a few weeks later got a restraining order against him. For the 4th of July this year, my family and I'm 14, went to Redondo Beach in California to have a nice, once-in-a-lifetime lobster dinner and look at the fireworks afterwards. The dinner was nice, the fireworks were spectacular, but as we were walking back to our car, we noticed a commotion going on. Some overweight redneck starts screaming and yelling obscenities, not minding the fact that there are a whole bunch of kids around. He yells to his friend, I guess she's over there talking to another motherfucker behind my back. Note that she is his significant other, and she's literally not more than 10 feet behind him. The woman doesn't say a word. She walks into the nearest restroom ready to bolt her eyes out, while her dick husband, they looked in their 40s, so I'll say husband rather than boyfriend, kept walking with his pal, yelling, don't even bother coming out of that shit cause I'm not driving you home, yeah dumb bitch. The whole crowd was sustained in a big WTF moment. The situation sort of disperses, and we continue walking to our car. Previously, I had visited the arcade with my sister and won a few prizes. We were not at our car yet, but we were still on the pier and my little sister was showing my mom the prizes we had won. After my little sister is done showing off, we start heading to our car again. As we pass the parking lot, we notice the same redneck dude standing there, and the clearly upset woman and the guy's pal appeared out of nowhere. "So where the fuck were you, Martha?" yells the fatty. The woman remains silent and the other man pipes up, "We were looking for you." At this time they proceed to enter the parking lot, and their redneck gets pissed and hops into his van, leaving the rest of his party behind. He turns on the van and drives forward about 30 feet to try and scare Martha. She stands there in disbelief, and he slams the brakes, rolls down the window and screams at her to get the fuck in the van, or I'm leaving you behind. Side note, the whole crowd is still staring at this douchebag be an asshole to his buddies. She gets in, wiping away tears, and trying not to even face the guy's general direction. They are about to go down the driveway and leave, when he slams on the brakes once again, and literally pushes her out of the van. He locks the van in the middle of the parking lot, gets out, and chases down his buddy. 5 minutes later, the rabble starts up again, and you can tell that people are talking about this asshole. We proceeded to leave, and as we were driving out of the parking lot, we noticed that the guy's van was right in front of us. So we kept hearing him scream and yell inside the van, and eventually we drove off in different directions and never saw each other again. TL, Doctor, some drunk redneck